So, as a theorist, there are several things that you can tackle in nuclear physics, in the nuclear physics that is done in the lab. Very often you're interested in how these nucleons work together to form matter or to form whatever exotic species that you might be interested in. And so that section, we'd call it structure, nuclear structure. On the other hand, many of these nuclei, you need to make them react with a target in order to understand what's going on. And so in order to do that, you obviously have to understand the reaction. And so there's theorists that do nuclear reactions, and I'm a nuclear reaction person. So one of the great things about being a nuclear reaction theorist is that you make that connection between data and the structure you want to understand. People measure these reactions that I'm talking about. They're not some abstract thing. People are, as we speak, down in that vault trying to understand what's going on in one of these reactions. In fact, at the moment, there's a charge exchange reaction taking place. And so it's very exciting to be at the place where these things are measured. And I get to talk to the experimentalists as much as I want, really. I just have to cross a corridor and I'll find my experimental colleagues. And sometimes I don't even need to do that because they sit in my office for hours asking me questions. So that's a very stimulating way of working. So I could quote the worst example and the best example of something you try, because this is science, and science means it's not been done before. So you're trying it for the first time. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes your idea is just wrong. And just coming out of my PhD and in discussions with another scientist in England, we thought that we had a great solution for treating Coulomb wave functions, which means between things that have charge. It's a complication in the problem, and we believed we had the solution for this by a certain expansion. So we worked really hard on this. It's a very mathematical thing, and at the end we came to the conclusion it didn't converge. It just did not converge for the cases we were interested. So it's one of these cases where I've got a whole drawer of attempts that didn't really work out. So it's part of what science is, and you don't get demotivated by that. You just have to, okay, close the drawer, try another thing. So a good example of something that is very, very encouraging was some calculations we were working on back in the 90s, late 90s. We were interested in understanding the breakup of a given very exotic loosely bound system. And we had done some calculations, some preliminary approximate calculations, and gotten some results. And then when we included more physics, we suddenly got much more cross-section than we were getting before. And there was no data at the time. So we went to a conference. In fact, I went to the conference. The conference was in India, which was really exciting. It was my first time in India, and I was very, very excited about the place. But also, I had these new results, and I was a bit scared of showing them, because suddenly I was telling people, look, the approximate way we were doing things is not right, and I'm getting this large cross-section, and I don't really know whether it's going to be consistent with the measurement. So I was kind of young and a bit scared of presenting the results, and just after my talk, the experimentalist had a talk that was exactly on the same theme and showing measurements rather than the theory. So I presented my talk, and I was so relieved when I saw the data, and it was just bang on what I had calculated. So that's an example of something that really pays for a long time. You know, suddenly you're really happy. I had a permanent position in Portugal before I moved here, and the lab was interested in my work, and I really thought it was a unique opportunity. So I left the situation, the comfy situation that I had, and I came here because I really felt I was really going to be at the center where everything is happening. So in this field, the lab is the best. And there are other places that are now developing their machines and improving in such a manner that they may overtake us in a few years. But certainly when I moved here and until now, this lab has this unique facility that allows us to get a lot of interesting data. And it's got, perhaps even more important than that, it's got a group of excellent people that are very active, very creative, and working really hard to solve these nuclear physics questions. So I'm in this situation where I'm the first faculty at this lab. When I arrived at the lab, there were no other women in my position. And so what do you do when you don't have anybody to ask the kind of female-related questions? And it's not as easy. So if you're a woman trying to come into physics, let me tell you, I understand your fear because it's not always that easy. But fortunately, the whole culture in the US is changing, and there is an effort, a concerted effort, not only locally at MSU and in particular at the NSCL, but also all through the various universities and the national labs, and also driven by the funding agencies that are really pushing us all in that direction. There is an effort of inclusion. And at the moment, I am working in the diversity committee in the lab, and we're doing actual projects to make diversity not only for women but for everybody else that considers themselves a minority in some way. We're doing work to make this lab a better place. So a lot of what we do in our everyday life is little details, trying to fix bugs or trying to develop this little part of the algebra that you need in order to then get the equation that you want. Or then on the experimental side, it'll be plugging these cables to make sure that the data acquisition system is working properly. So a lot of it is in the detail. But what I always try to tell students that start losing their motivation is to not lose the perspective. Even though you're working in this little detail, there's this big picture and the big questions that we're trying to address. And it's very important to keep that in mind because that's the driving force. That's what really keeps us motivated. That's what makes us jump out of bed in the morning. And so that's very important that you don't lose that.
NSCL is a world-leading laboratory for rare isotope research and nuclear science education. Operation of NSCL as a national user facility is supported by the Experimental Nuclear Physics Program of the National Science Foundation.